Hello humans, I am the Black Cat, and today we look at Bride of the Re-Animator. Bride of the Re-Animator was released in 1990, directed by Brian Yuzna, starring Jeffrey Combs and Bruce Abbott. Bride of the Re-Animator starts 8 months after the events of the first film. Dan and Herbert are in South Peru working as field doctors, but as the Civil War rages, they decide it's time to go back to America. Somehow they both get jobs as doctors in a hospital, but the doctor that's investigating bodies from the first movie is also at this hospital, so I'm not sure how that works. How are they able to get jobs there? I mean, technically they didn't finish medical school, right? It's a bit confusing. It just kind of jumps from they're in Peru to they're working in this hospital. There's no explanation about how Herbert was able to escape. There's no follow through about Megan. I mean, at the end of the first movie, Dan injected Megan with the reagent, but now the only thing left of her is her heart. What happened to the rest of her? It's never really explained. Anyway, Herbert talks about the idea of creating new life rather than reanimating dead bodies. Apparently Herbert got the idea from seeing how Dr. Hill's body was able to reanimate. He realized that body parts could be reanimated, and so he would be able to create new life from parts. So now Herbert wants to basically build a person from body parts. Dan isn't sure if this is a good idea, but Herbert reveals that he has Megan's heart and tells Dan that her heart could be to gain in a new body. This apparently is all the motivation that Dan needs. We know already that he's a complete dope, so no surprise there. With this movie, it seems to be more towards the Frankenstein concept, even though this idea was apparently included in Lovecraft's original story, but the idea does lead to some interesting creations. First we see Herbert put together a little hand creature that he brings to life. It's kind of cute in a grotesque kind of way. The use of stop motion animation for the little hand creature I thought was a nice touch. So apparently one of the dead bodies that Dr. Hill reanimated was the wife of a police lieutenant. So now that lieutenant is also investigating the incident known as the Miskatonic Hospital Massacre. Meanwhile, Dr. Wilbur Graves at the hospital, who is in charge of investigating the massacre, discovers a leftover bottle of the reagent, but that's not all he finds. The lieutenant also brings to him the head of none other than Dr. Hill. Curiosity gets the better of Dr. Graves and he uses the reagent on a bat. The bat of course attacks him, so he cuts its wings off to stop it from flying, but the wings still flap. Then in a moment of madness, Dr. Graves decides to try the reagent on Dr. Hill's head, bringing him back to life again. Later, Dr. Hill makes Dr. Graves attach the bat wings to him, so now Dr. Hill is able to fly around like a weird man head bat thing. Dan and West now live in an old funeral home. It's very convenient for Herbert as it has a large basement and a graveyard next door. He discovers that he could dig a tunnel through to the graveyard. During their time in Peru, they met a girl called Francesca, and for some reason she shows up in America. Again, it's not explained why, but she manages to track down Dan. Dan the dope invites her to their house for dinner. Like, really Dan? You've got Herbert West in the basement with random body parts and you invite this girl to your house. But then Dan was never the brightest bulb in the pack. Herbert even warns him not to let the little head do the thinking, but he does anyway. Anyway, one thing leads to another and Dan and Francesca end up hooking up. While all this is going on, there's also another patient at the hospital that is terminally ill, but she has blonde hair, so Dan becomes attached to her because he says she reminds him of Megan. When she inevitably dies, Herbert decides to take her head for their creation. Every time Dan tries to say no to Herbert, he manages to convince Dan that it's a good idea and that Dan in fact wants it, and apparently he does because Herbert is able to sway him every time. It's mind-boggling that this guy is so easily led. Anyway, eventually they complete gathering the parts for Herbert's master creation, and it's time to give her life. While they're doing this, Dr. Hill has recruited some of the old reanimated bodies that were still around from the last movie, including the lieutenant's wife. Hill of course wants to get to Herbert, so they all go to their house. As the bride is waking, Dan is somehow convinced that she's Megan, and he even drops the line, "She's alive." Francesca tells him that Megan is dead and he somehow snaps out of it, but at this point point, Dr. Hill and the others are storming the house. In order to escape, Herbert starts to go to the tunnel to the graveyard. But guess who's waiting for him on the other side? Not only Dr. Hill, who's now flying bat head thing, but also all the rejected creations that Herbert's been making out of boredom. Overall, this movie was very enjoyable. I did manage to get a few laughs out of it. The story itself is a little, how should I say, it seemed a little rushed. Like 1 minute Dan's all for this creation and the next he's pushing her away saying she's a monster. There's no in between. In the first movie, Dr. Hill played a major part, but this time around he didn't seem to do much. His being brought back to life was almost like a side story, just kind of added on because we have to have conflict. After looking it up, apparently the whole thing was rushed from writing the script to production, and I really think that it had an impact on how the movie felt. It just felt rushed. I would be interested to see what they could have done if it had plenty of time to really work on it. The effects were great, of course. As I mentioned, there was some stop motion animation. Personally, I like the look of stop motion. Kind of gives it its own aesthetic. There was also some CGI, I think, but early CGI. You know what I mean. The kind that looks like they cut and paste images from a green screen. But they also used clever practical effects, like they did with the first movie, with hidden actors and thoughtful camera angles. In the end, practical always looks the best because it's real. But yeah, like I said, I found this movie to be very enjoyable. So would I watch it again? Yes I would. It was a fun movie. It's not a movie to be taken seriously. But anyway, that's all the time I have for this video. Let me know what you think of this movie if you've seen it. If you like this review, please give it a like. If you'd like to see more, you can also subscribe. But for now, thank you for watching and I'll catch you next time. Bye!